You don't belong here anymore. That's what my stepson, Tyler, said to me while standing in the middle of my own living room. The one I decorated, cleaned, and paid half the mortgage for after my husband died. He was wearing that smug smirk he probably learned from his mother, arms folded like a cop ready to make an arrest. The words hit me harder than I expected. I remember the sound of the refrigerator humming behind him and the smell of lemon cleaner still hanging in the air. I had just finished mopping. My hands were still damp. "Excuse me?" I asked, hoping I'd misheard. He pointed toward the door like I was some stranger who'd wandered in. "Dad's gone. The house goes to the family now. You had your time." Family. That word twisted in my gut. For years, I'd tried to be his family. I cooked for him when he visited, remembered his birthdays, even helped him pay off one of his college loans when he lost his job. But now he was looking at me like I was an intruder. I could feel the blood drain from my face. "Tyler, this is my home too. Your father and I." "My father," he cut me off. "Not yours. You're not blood." He turned away, muttering something about the will, about legal procedures, about how Dad would have wanted things simple. I wanted to scream. Instead, I stood frozen, watching him toss my husband's papers onto the table, our marriage certificate, the deed, the insurance forms, all spread out like evidence in a trial I hadn't agreed to attend. The next morning, I found an envelope taped to my bedroom door. It was a formal notice to vacate. Typed. Cold. No signature. Just his name printed at the bottom. I sat on the edge of my bed staring at it for hours. The sunlight was creeping across the carpet, and I could see the dust dancing in the air. Every corner of that room held memories. The nightstands we bought from a garage sale, the picture of my late husband smiling on our trip to Montana. Tyler wanted me to leave it all behind, like it meant nothing. That evening, I drove to the small diner downtown where I used to work before I married my husband. I ordered coffee I didn't drink and tried to think straight. The waitress, an old friend named Martha, recognized me and asked what was wrong. I told her everything, about the will, about Tyler, about how he'd practically spit in my face. She listened quietly, then said something that stuck with me. "You can let him throw you out, or you can remind him whose name is really on those papers." That night, I went through every drawer and file cabinet in the house. I found old receipts, joint bank statements, the marriage license, property tax forms, and there it was, my name, right next to my husband's on the deed. I wasn't some tenant. I was a co-owner. The next day, Tyler came by with a moving company flyer. "I found you some help," he said casually. "They can pack you up by next week." I looked him dead in the eye and said, "You might want to call them for yourself. Because I'm not going anywhere." For the first time, he looked surprised, like he'd expected me to roll over and beg. He laughed under his breath and said, "We'll see about that." He didn't know it, but something inside me shifted that moment. I'd been quiet my whole life, polite, obedient, patient. But grief and betrayal have a way of hardening a person. I wasn't just defending a house. I was defending the life I built with the man I loved. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and made a list. It had only 3 words on it: bank, lawyer, evidence. I was going to find out exactly what my rights were, and I wasn't leaving until I did. I looked at the front door as I locked it before bed. The same door Tyler had pointed me toward. I whispered to myself, "Not yet." The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. I barely slept. I just kept replaying Tyler's smirk in my mind. The way he pointed at the door, like I was disposable. But anger can be useful if you know how to use it. I made coffee, pulled my hair back, and started calling law offices. Most of them wanted a consultation fee I couldn't afford. My husband and I had savings once, but between his hospital bills and funeral costs, most of it was gone. Still, I wasn't about to let money stop me. On the 5th call, I found someone, Linda Green, a property and estate lawyer who said she could squeeze me in that afternoon. Her office was in an old brick building downtown, the kind that smelled like paper and old air conditioning. She looked about my age, silver hair pulled into a bun, glasses perched low on her nose. She had this calm confidence about her that immediately made me feel like I wasn't alone anymore. So, she said after I explained everything, "Your stepson believes the property belongs solely to him?" I nodded, handing her the folder of documents I'd collected. "He says it's in the will." Linda flipped through the pages carefully. "Do you have a copy of the will?" I shook my head. "He won't show me. He just keeps saying Dad wanted him to handle things." Her eyes narrowed. "That's not how it works. You're a legal spouse, and unless there was a prenuptial agreement or specific clause excluding you, which would be unusual, you're entitled to your share. Possibly more." Those words were like oxygen. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. She leaned forward. "You'll need to get a certified copy of the will from the county clerk's office. Don't tell him yet. Let's see what we're dealing with first." I thanked her and left feeling steadier than I had in months. Outside, I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel. The sun was high, and the world looked different, sharper, more alive. I wasn't powerless. Tyler might have underestimated me, but I had years of experience being underestimated. That was my secret weapon. At the clerk's office, the woman behind the counter handed me a thin envelope. My hands shook as I opened it. The will was short, 2 pages. It left Tyler the car and stocks. The house, however, was explicitly listed as joint marital property, which meant half of it was legally mine. He either didn't read it properly, or he was counting on me never checking. That night, I placed the will next to the marriage certificate on the kitchen table and took a long look at both. The quiet of the house wrapped around me. It didn't feel like loneliness anymore. It felt like focus. But Tyler didn't stop. He showed up 2 days later with his girlfriend, a woman named Jessica, who looked barely 30 and had a voice that could cut glass. She walked through the living room like she owned the place. "Oh, it's cute," she said, glancing around. "But we'll have to redo everything once you move out." "I'm thinking open concept." Tyler grinned. "Yeah, mom stuff can go. Maybe sell it." I smiled tightly, heart pounding. "Funny, considering you'll be redecorating my half." Jessica frowned. "Your half?" I slid the papers toward them. The deed, the will, everything. "You should probably read before you redecorate." Tyler's face turned red. "You think this changes anything?" "Dad wanted me to handle his estate. And I will," I said calmly. "My way." He started shouting about fairness, about how blood family should matter more than paperwork. Jessica tugged at his arm, embarrassed, but he wasn't done. He slammed the papers back on the table and said, "You'll regret this." When they left, I sat there shaking. Not from fear, from adrenaline. I knew what was coming next. People like Tyler don't back off easily. They double down. So I doubled down too. I called Linda the next morning. "He's threatening to fight me," I told her. "Good," she said simply. "Now we'll make it official. File for your legal rights of possession and co-ownership. If he pushes harder, we'll push back." The next few weeks were a blur of paperwork, notarized forms, and phone calls. I learned more about property law than I ever thought I would. I also learned how much strength you find when you stop asking for permission to exist. Late one night, while going through some of my husband's old emails, I found something that made my stomach drop. A message from his lawyer, dated 2 months before he died. The subject line read, "Updated estate, attached version signed." The attachment was still there. And when I opened it, I saw something I hadn't expected, a clause giving me full ownership of the house in the event of his death. Tyler had lied, or worse, hidden this version completely. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I hit print, and for the first time I smiled. It was time to turn the tables for real. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was scared, but because adrenaline kept me sharp. Every creak in the house sounded different now, like the walls were holding their breath with me. I sat at the dining table surrounded by papers. 2 wills, the deed, the marriage license, and my husband's last letter, tucked between insurance forms. He had handwritten one line at the bottom. "I want you to be secure no matter what happens." That was all the motivation I needed. The next morning, I went back to Linda's office. a folder full of printed emails in hand. When she saw the second version of the will, her eyebrows shot up. "This changes everything," she said. "If this version is signed and dated after the one on file, it overrides it completely. You could own the property outright." I nodded, gripping my coffee. "So what's next?" She smiled faintly. "We verify it. Then we let him hang himself with his own lies." She drafted a formal verification request to the late attorney's office. Within 2 days, they confirmed the updated will's legitimacy. Notarized, filed electronically, and yes, fully signed by my husband. When the confirmation email came through, I read it twice, then once more out loud. "Confirmed valid," it said. Just 2 words, but they felt like justice. I sat there thinking of all the times I'd cooked dinner for Tyler, ironed his shirts when he came home from college, loaned him money when he couldn't pay rent. And now, after all that, he tried to toss me out like garbage. "No, not anymore." Linda suggested we stay quiet for now. "Let him make his next move," she said. "It's always better when the liar thinks he's winning." And sure enough, he did. A week later, I got a notice from his lawyer, or more accurately, his girlfriend's cousin, who called himself a legal consultant. It was a sloppily typed letter demanding I vacate within 30 days. I almost laughed. I called Linda. "Should I respond?" She chuckled. "No, you should frame it. It'll look great next to the deed when we file for ownership." But I didn't just sit back. I started documenting everything. Every visit, every threat, every text message. I even recorded the time Tyler shouted at me from the front lawn when I wouldn't open the door. "You're stealing what's mine," he yelled, voice echoing down the quiet street. The neighbors saw. That part was important. Over the next few weeks, I started planting seeds, not of revenge, but of truth. I invited a few of my husband's old friends over for coffee. They hadn't visited in a while, not since the funeral. As we sat in the kitchen, I showed them the will and explained what was happening. They were shocked. "He'd be ashamed of Tyler," one of them said. "Your husband talked about how proud he was that you kept this home together." I didn't cry. I just nodded. "He raised a good son once," I said quietly. "I'm just trying to remind him of that." Words spread faster than I expected. Small towns have long memories and fast mouths. A week later, Tyler showed up again, angrier this time. "You've been talking to people," he snapped. "People talk on their own," I said calmly. "Maybe you should think about why." He stepped closer, trying to intimidate me. "You can't hide behind paperwork forever." I held up my phone. The camera light blinked red. "Smile." He froze. "You're recording me?" I smiled back. "I record everything now. For safety." That night, I transferred all the evidence, videos, texts, screenshots, into a secure folder. I labeled it, "For Tyler." It wasn't revenge. It was insurance. Linda called the next day with good news. "The probate judge has acknowledged your version of the will," she said. "We'll move to confirm title transfer within 2 weeks. He won't be able to touch you, or the house." I felt like I could finally exhale. But deep down, I knew Tyler wouldn't let it end quietly. People who live off manipulation rarely do. Sure enough, 2 nights later, I woke up to banging on the door. "Open up." It was Tyler. He was drunk. I could tell from the slurred shouting. "You think you beat me? This isn't over." I didn't open it. I just called the police. By the time they arrived, he was gone. But that was the final piece of evidence I needed, the harassment report. The next morning, I sat in my favorite chair by the window, watching the light hit the papers on the table, the same papers that once scared me. Now they felt like armor. I whispered, "You wanted me out, Tyler. But you just made sure I'll never leave." When I walked into the courthouse that morning, I wore my husband's old watch. It didn't even work anymore, but it reminded me why I was doing this, to protect the life we built, minute by minute, year by year. Linda met me at the entrance, holding a neat stack of folders. "Keep your answers short, stay calm," she said. "The truth already speaks for itself." Tyler was already inside, sitting next to that so-called legal consultant. He didn't even look at me at first. When he finally did, his eyes were full of hate, the kind that comes from embarrassment, not loss. His girlfriend Jessica was behind him, pretending to scroll on her phone like this was some minor inconvenience. The judge was a middle-aged woman named Judge Simmons, sharp as a blade and patient as a mother who's seen too many grown children act like toddlers. She flipped through the files, looked up at Tyler, and said, "Mr. Evans, do you have any legally recognized counsel?" Tyler cleared his throat. "He's assisting me." "Assisting is not representing," she said flatly. "I'll give you 5 minutes to decide whether you want to proceed on your own." I could feel Linda smiling beside me. It was a quiet, confident smile, the kind you only earn after years of watching justice unfold slowly, like dawn. When the hearing started, Linda went first. She presented the documents, the deed, the first will, the updated will, and finally the verification from the late attorney's office. She didn't dramatize it. She just laid it out like building blocks, one fact at a time. Then she pulled out the printed email Tyler had sent me weeks ago, the one demanding I leave the property. "Your Honor," Linda said, her voice calm but firm, "this was sent after he was already informed, verbally and in writing, that the home was co-owned. That constitutes intimidation and harassment under estate dispute statutes." Tyler's face turned red. "That's not true. She's twisting everything. My dad told me." Judge Simmons raised a hand. "Do you have written proof of your father's intent that overrides a notarized will?" He fell silent. She turned to me. "Mrs. Evans, do you intend to remain in your residence?" I nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. It's my home. I just want peace." It was quiet for a long moment. Then the judge said, "You're entitled to it. Ownership of the property shall remain with Mrs. Evans, full title vested by the updated will." Case closed. The gavel hit wood. Just like that. Tyler stormed out without looking at me. Jessica followed, muttering under her breath. I just sat there for a second, my hands trembling, not from fear this time, but from relief. Outside, Linda squeezed my shoulder. "You did it." I didn't realize I was crying until she handed me a tissue. "Thank you," I said softly, "for believing me." She smiled. "He made one mistake. He underestimated a woman who's done her homework." When I drove home that afternoon, the neighborhood felt different. Warmer. A few of my neighbors were outside. Martha from the diner waved from across the street. She must have heard. "Good for you," she shouted. "Don't let them push you around." I laughed through my tears. "I won't," I called back. That night, I sat by the window again, the same chair, same view. But the silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was peaceful. The papers were still on the table, but now they felt like trophies. Proof that I could stand my ground and win. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Tyler. "You might have won the house, but you'll regret it. You'll see." I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I took a screenshot, saved it to my evidence folder, and replied, "Good night, Tyler." I blocked his number, but I knew it wasn't over. People like him don't stop after losing in court. They look for new ways to strike. And sure enough, 3 days later, I found out he'd been telling everyone in town that I'd manipulated his dying father, that I'd forged the will, tricked him, used my age and pity to get sympathy. At first, I thought I could ignore it. But the whispering started. People I'd known for years began avoiding me at the grocery store. Even Martha said, "Honey, I know it's not true, but you might want to clear your name before this gets ugly." So I made a decision that night. If Tyler wanted a public story, I'd give him one, just not the one he expected. The next morning, I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I brewed my coffee, opened my laptop, and wrote everything down. Every date, every text, every conversation, every lie. It was time to take this fight out of the shadows. I started small. I sent a calm, factual email to a few of my husband's friends and family members, the same ones Tyler had been talking to behind my back. "I'm aware of some false stories going around," I wrote. "For transparency, I'm attaching the court judgment, the verified will, and proof of ownership. I'd appreciate if you shared these with anyone who's heard otherwise. No drama. No pleading. Just the truth, written plainly." Within hours, my inbox started filling with responses, short, stunned replies from people who'd clearly been fed Tyler's lies. "I'm so sorry, Mary. I can't believe he'd do that. We had no idea what really happened." But one reply stood out, from Mr. Collins, my husband's oldest friend and the executor of his previous will. Mary, I need to see you. There's something you should know. That afternoon, I met him at a quiet cafe near the courthouse. He looked tired, older than I remembered. I didn't want to get involved, he said, stirring his coffee. But I've seen what Tyler's been saying. He's showing people a different version of the will. An older one. I thought you should know. I sighed. The first version, you mean? He nodded. Yes. But the way he tells it, that's the real one. He's showing copies around town saying you faked the second one. I took a deep breath. Do you believe him? He leaned forward, voice low. No. I saw your husband sign that update myself. But Tyler doesn't know that. Maybe it's time someone reminded him. I smiled. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like a victim anymore. I felt like someone about to deliver a lesson. That night, I called Linda. What if we make the truth public? Officially. She paused. You mean a statement? Exactly. Something official, filed and stamped. The next day, she helped me draft a notarized statement of property ownership, citing court documents and witness verification from Mr. Collins. It was short, legal, and impossible to dispute. We posted it to the county's public record database, accessible to anyone who bothered to check. But I didn't stop there. Martha from the diner suggested I join a local Facebook group called Haven Hill Neighbors, the same one Tyler had been using to spread his lies. So I joined quietly and waited. It didn't take long before I saw his post. Some people pretend to be saints while robbing families blind. My father trusted the wrong woman. The comments were mixed, some sympathetic, some skeptical. I scrolled slowly, reading every word, every accusation. Then I hit reply. Hi, Tyler. Since you're comfortable discussing this publicly, I'll do the same. Here's the verified will, signed, witnessed, and approved in court. You can all read it yourselves. I attached a screenshot of the official judgment. No insults. No anger. Just evidence. The post exploded. Within an hour, people flooded the thread with support. This is the truth, son. Stop lying. She raised you better than this. Mary, we believe you. Tyler deleted his post soon after, but the damage to his reputation was done, and not by rumor, but by fact. 2 days later, I got a call from Jessica, his girlfriend. Her voice trembled. I just wanted to say, I didn't know. He told me you were some gold digger who took everything. I'm sorry. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. It's all right, I said gently. Now you know who he really is. There was silence on the line before she whispered, I'm leaving him. When I hung up, I didn't feel joy. I felt something better. Peace. The next morning, I found Tyler sitting in his car outside the house. His eyes were bloodshot. I walked right up to the window. You done spreading stories? I asked. He looked away. You humiliated me. I folded my arms. No, Tyler. You did that yourself. He didn't reply. After a long pause, he turned the key and drove away. I watched him go, feeling something I hadn't in months, closure. But just when I thought it was over, I got a call from Linda later that week. There's one last thing, she said. The house title transfer is complete. It's officially in your name, only yours. You're free of him, Mary. I thanked her, my throat tight. That night, I stood in front of the mirror. The same mirror that once reflected a scared widow now showed someone different, someone calm, firm, and alive again. I placed the new house keys beside the old ones on the dresser. 2 sets, side by side, one for the past, one for the future. And for the first time in years, I felt completely, undeniably at home. For about 2 weeks after the title transfer, life finally felt normal again. I went back to volunteering at the library, replanted the roses in the front yard, and even started sleeping through the night without waking up to phantom noises. The quiet didn't feel like loneliness anymore. It felt earned. But peace never lasts long when you've stood up to someone who's used to control. Tyler might have lost the house and his reputation, but he still had something dangerous, pride. And pride mixed with humiliation is a potent poison. It started small. First, I noticed tire marks on my driveway late one night, fresh, muddy, as if someone had parked there just to stare at the house. Then my mailbox went missing. At first, I thought it was kids playing around. But the third time it happened, I knew better. I reported it to the police, and they logged it as minor vandalism. To them, maybe it was. But to me, it was a message, you're not safe yet. Linda called me a few days later to check in. When I told her about it, she sighed. It's not uncommon after a legal loss like his. Keep documenting everything. You already know how. I did. I logged every incident in a notebook. Date, time, what happened. I even installed a small camera by the porch light. If Tyler thought I'd retreat again, he didn't know who I'd become. Then came the breaking point. One Saturday morning, I woke up to find the word thief spray-painted across my garage door in red. It was crude and angry, the kind of thing you can't mistake for random mischief. My heart pounded, but I didn't cry this time. I took pictures, called the police, and sent the evidence straight to Linda. The officer who showed up was a young man, probably younger than Tyler. He looked uncomfortable, like he didn't know how to talk to someone my age who'd clearly seen worse. We'll add this to your report, ma'am, he said. You might want to think about a restraining order. I already have, I said. And I'll be filing it today. I spent the afternoon cleaning the paint, stroke by stroke, until the red turned faint pink under the scrubbing brush. It was hard work, but every swipe felt like reclaiming something. Not the wall, but my piece. That evening, Martha dropped by with a casserole. She didn't say much. She just stood beside me, looking at the faint stains on the garage. After a moment, she said, You know, Mary, you could sell this place. Move somewhere fresh. Start over. I smiled weakly. Maybe someday, but not yet. This house has my name on it now. I'm not running again. That night, as I locked the door, I noticed something on the porch, an envelope. No stamp, no name. Just tucked under the welcome mat. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a folded piece of paper. It read, You think you've won, but Dad would have chosen family over paperwork any day. You'll never belong here. No signature, but I didn't need one. The handwriting was unmistakable. The next morning, I filed for the restraining order and gave the police every piece of evidence I had. The photos, the texts, the videos, the note. Linda told me to stay cautious but calm. He's unraveling, Mary. It's his last attempt to scare you. Still, the message stuck with me. You'll never belong here. It echoed through the house as I made breakfast, folded laundry, watered the plants. But instead of letting it break me, I decided to confront it. If he thought I didn't belong, I'd prove the opposite, that I was the heart of this home now. So I invited the neighbors over that weekend, the ones who'd supported me and even the ones who hadn't. I baked pies, brewed coffee, and opened every door. It wasn't about showing off. It was about reclaiming space. When people walked in, they complimented the fresh paint, the garden, the warmth. It feels like you're home, one woman said. I smiled and said, That's because it is. Later that night, when everyone left, I sat in the quiet again. The kind of quiet that feels like victory, not isolation. I thought about my husband, about everything we'd built and everything I'd fought to keep. But deep down, I knew something was still coming. Tyler wasn't done, not yet. And when he showed up again, it wouldn't be with paint or letters. It would be worse. It happened on a Wednesday night. Rain was coming down in sheets, tapping against the windows like nervous fingers. I was sitting on the couch, reading through one of my husband's old journals, when I heard it, the sound of gravel crunching outside. I froze. For a few seconds, I told myself it was just the wind or maybe a car turning around. But then came the sharp flicker of headlights through the curtains. Someone had pulled into my driveway. I grabbed my phone and peeked through the blinds. Tyler's truck. My stomach dropped. The restraining order had been approved just 2 days earlier. He was already violating it. I dialed 911 before stepping away from the window. My hands were trembling, but my voice stayed steady when I spoke to the dispatcher. My stepson is outside. I have a restraining order against him. He's on my property right now. The operator told me to stay inside, doors locked, lights on. I did exactly that. I could hear him outside, shouting something I couldn't fully make out. His voice was muffled by the storm, but I caught pieces of it. You ruined everything. You think you can erase me? The police took 10 minutes to arrive. It felt like hours. When the flashing lights hit the street, I peeked again. 2 officers got out and started talking to him. He was drenched, waving his arms, pointing toward the house. I couldn't hear the words, but I could see the fury written all over his face. They eventually cuffed him. Even then, he twisted around and shouted, "This isn't over, Mary. You'll see what you've done." But I didn't flinch. I stood by the window and just watched. After they drove him away, one of the officers came to my door. "He's being taken in for violation of the restraining order," he said. "Do you want to press charges?" "Yes," I said quietly. "I do." The days after that felt strangely empty. You'd think relief would come easy after something like that, but instead, it was quiet. Too quiet. I spent my time cleaning, cooking, walking around the garden, trying to feel normal. Then, a week later, I got a letter from his lawyer, a real one this time. It said Tyler was being charged with trespassing and harassment, but they were requesting leniency, citing emotional distress caused by inheritance disputes. Linda called me that afternoon. "He's trying to spin it," she said. "Make you look like the aggressor, the manipulator." I laughed bitterly. Classic Tyler. Always the victim. Still, part of me felt sick. I'd known this kid since he was 12. I remembered the first Christmas we spent together, him sulking in the corner because I'd wrapped his gifts in silver instead of gold. I remembered how he used to call me Miss Mary before he started calling me names. Now, he was sitting in a jail cell blaming me for his life choices. But I wasn't backing down. Not now. Not after everything. So I did something that surprised even Linda. I wrote him a letter. "Tyler, I'm not your enemy. I never was. Your father loved you. He wanted you to have a good life, not an easy one. I'm sorry you can't see that yet. I won't let hate destroy what he built. I'm not fighting you anymore. I'm protecting what's right. Mary." Linda thought I was crazy for sending it. "You don't owe him anything," she said. "I know," I replied. "That's why it'll bother him more." 2 weeks later, I got a response. It wasn't long, just one line scrawled across cheap paper. "You win." No apology. No closure. Just that. But it was enough. The court upheld the restraining order and extended it to 5 years. He was ordered to attend anger management sessions and pay for the property damage. I didn't celebrate. I just stood in the kitchen that night, looking out the window at the rain again. The same view as that night he came for me. Except this time I wasn't scared. I'd already weathered the storm. Still, deep down, I knew something important had changed, not just in him, but in me. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was learning what power really felt like. Quiet, steady, unshakable. And as much as I wanted to close this chapter, fate wasn't done with me yet. Because just when I thought I'd finally won, something unexpected arrived in the mail, a document that would change everything. The letter came in a plain white envelope. No return address, just my name in thin black ink. At first, I thought it was another nasty note from Tyler, but the handwriting was neat, careful. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a bank logo in the corner. Notice of dormant account, joint holder deceased, secondary signature required for closure. It listed a small savings account under my husband's name. I didn't recognize the branch, but the balance made my heart skip. $84,700. I called the number immediately. The woman on the other end verified my details and said, "Yes, ma'am." It was a joint marital account, opened about 8 years ago. "We mailed multiple notices to your address, but they were returned marked undeliverable." I frowned. "Returned? I've lived here the whole time." She hesitated. "It says the last change of address was filed 6 months ago, to a P.O. box in Tyler's name." My hands went cold. "Excuse me." "Yes. We can provide documentation if you'd like to review it." I thanked her, hung up, and just sat there staring at the wall. Tyler hadn't just tried to take the house. He'd tried to take the money too, the one safety net my husband had left me. That night, I pulled out the folder again. My stack of papers, the evidence trail that had already saved me once. But this time, it wasn't about defense. It was about accountability. I called Linda first thing the next morning. When I told her, she went quiet for a long moment before saying, "Mary, this could be fraud." You realize that, right? Yes, I said. And I want to pursue it. Within 2 days, we had the bank records. Tyler had submitted a fake address change, forged a copy of my signature, and even withdrawn small amounts over several months. Not enough to raise red flags, but enough to test whether anyone was watching. Linda sat across from me, flipping through the statements. This is serious, she said. He could face felony charges. I sighed. I don't want revenge. I just want it to stop. I know, she said softly. But sometimes justice looks like consequences. She filed the report with the Financial Crimes Unit. I didn't expect much, cases like that move slowly, but it was the right thing to do. Still, a part of me hated that it had come to this. He wasn't just my stepson. He was a boy I'd once read bedtime stories to, whose scraped knees I'd bandaged. Somewhere along the way, grief and greed had turned him into someone I barely recognized. A few weeks passed. The days grew warmer, quieter. I started tending the garden again, repainting the kitchen cabinets, little things that made the house feel like mine in a new way. Then, one morning, I got a call from the investigator handling the case. Mrs. Evans, he said, we've concluded our review. The evidence is clear. The signature was forged. The withdrawals were unauthorized. We'll be moving forward with charges. My throat went dry. Will he go to jail? That depends on whether he cooperates. He's been summoned to appear. When I hung up, I didn't feel triumph. Just a deep, weary sadness. Later that afternoon, I went for a walk to clear my head. As I passed the diner, Martha waved me in. Sit, she said, pouring me coffee before I could protest. You look like you've been holding your breath for years. I smiled weakly. Maybe I have. She leaned closer. You did everything right, Mary. Don't feel guilty for surviving. That night, I stood on the porch, watching the sunset turn the sky gold and pink. For the first time, I realized how long it had been since I'd allowed myself to just stand still. Then, a car pulled up quietly at the curb. I tensed, but it wasn't the truck. It was a small gray sedan. Tyler stepped out, hands in his pockets, head down. He looked thinner, older, defeated. I know I'm not supposed to be here, he said. I needed to tell you I got the notice. About the account. I crossed my arms. Then you also know what happens next. He nodded. Yeah, I do. We stood in silence for a long time. The only sound was the wind moving through the trees. Finally, he said, I messed everything up. I was angry about Dad dying, about you getting everything, but I was wrong. I studied him carefully. There was no arrogance left, no smugness, just a tired young man who'd finally hit the bottom. Anger doesn't excuse theft, Tyler, I said quietly. I know. He looked at the ground. I'll pay it back. Somehow. I didn't say anything. I just turned toward the door and paused. You were right about one thing, I said. Family matters. But family isn't blood. It's character. Then I closed the door behind me. Through the window, I watched him stand there for a moment before walking away into the fading light. When the silence returned, it felt different. Not heavy, not hollow. Just complete. The following week, the investigator called again. Mrs. Evans, Mr. Tyler Evans, has agreed to a settlement. He's confessed to the fraudulent activity, and he'll repay the full amount in restitution. You'll receive the funds in 2 installments. I didn't say anything for a moment. I just stared at the floor tiles, tracing the cracks with my eyes. So that's it. He paused. That's justice, ma'am. Justice. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like closing a door that had been open too long, letting cold air in. When the check arrived 2 weeks later, I didn't cash it right away. I set it on the kitchen counter under a paperweight shaped like a seashell, one my husband and I had picked up years ago during a trip to Myrtle Beach. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about everything that had come before it. The insults, the courtrooms, the fear, the exhaustion. That night, I poured a glass of red wine and sat on the back porch. The cicadas were loud. The air smelled like wet grass, and the house lights glowed softly behind me. I thought about how different I'd been a year ago. Anxious, apologetic, desperate to be accepted by people who had already decided I didn't belong. Not anymore. A few days later, Linda called. The restitution's cleared, she said. The case is closed. You're officially done with him. I exhaled. Done. The word felt lighter than I expected. Still, there was one more thing I needed to do. I drove to the cemetery where my husband was buried. It was a warm, quiet afternoon. The grass was trimmed, and the sun filtered through the oak trees, making the marble stones shimmer faintly. I knelt down beside his grave and laid a single white rose on the stone. I kept the house, I whispered, and I kept your name clean. It wasn't easy, but it's over now. The wind rustled through the leaves, and for a moment, it felt like he was listening. I wish you'd been here to tell him the truth, I said softly. But maybe he needed to hear it this way, from the woman who wouldn't break. I sat there for a while, watching the clouds move across the sky. Then I stood, brushed the dirt from my knees, and turned toward the car. On the drive home, I passed by the diner. Martha was outside wiping down the patio tables. She waved and shouted, "You coming by for pie, Mary?" I smiled. Maybe later. When I got home, I finally took the check to the bank. The teller smiled politely as I handed it over, and I caught my reflection in the glass partition. Older, yes, but stronger. There was a steadiness in my eyes that hadn't been there before. After that, I started making changes, quiet ones. I sold the old furniture Tyler used to sit on and replaced it with things that felt like me. I painted the walls soft blue. I even opened an account for a small home bakery business I'd always dreamed of starting. I called it Second Chance Sweets. Martha was my first customer. Best apple pie in town, she told everyone. Life slipped back into a rhythm. Slower, simpler, peaceful. The fear was gone. The house that once felt like a battleground now felt like a sanctuary. But one evening, just before closing the bakery for the day, I found something unexpected on the doorstep. A small cardboard box. No note, no return address. Inside was a framed photo, me, my husband, and Tyler from years ago, before everything fell apart. We were smiling, laughing mid-toast at a 4th of July barbecue. On the back of the frame, in shaky handwriting, were 3 words. "I'm sorry, Mom." I stood there for a long time, holding it. My throat tightened, and tears slipped down my cheeks before I could stop them. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was something close. A small, fragile beginning. That night, I hung the photo in the hallway. Not as a reminder of pain, but of how far I'd come. I whispered into the quiet house. I guess we both learned something, didn't we? The walls didn't answer, but the peace in the air was enough. It's been a year since that photo arrived. The house feels different now. Not haunted, not heavy, just alive. Every creak of the floorboards sounds familiar again. The kitchen smells like cinnamon most mornings, and my porch plants are finally thriving. Sometimes I catch myself standing in the doorway, coffee in hand, looking out toward the garden and thinking, I made it. The bakery is doing well. People drive across town for my pecan pie and blueberry muffins. Martha helps me with orders, and on weekends, we host small community bake sales for the local shelter. I don't make a fortune, but I sleep peacefully every night, and that's worth more than anything. One afternoon, as I was cleaning up after closing, I noticed a man outside standing by the edge of the sidewalk. Tyler. He looked different, older, calmer. His hair was shorter, his posture less defiant. He didn't come closer, just raised a hand in a small wave. I opened the door and stepped out slowly. "You can come in, I said. He shook his head. "No, I just wanted to say I'm leaving town. Got a job up north. Thought you should know." I nodded. "That's good. I hope you do well." He hesitated, then looked down. "You were right. Family's about character." I wasn't family for a long time. There was a long silence, not awkward, just quiet, like the world had stopped to listen. Finally, I said, "You're trying now. That counts." He smiled, a small, tired smile, and turned to leave. Before he got in his car, he called back, "Thanks for not giving up on me completely." When he drove off, I didn't cry. I just stood there in the golden light, feeling something like peace settle in my chest. Later that night, I went back inside and looked around, at the photos, the new furniture, the warm glow of the lamps. The house that once symbolized fear and loss now stood for survival. I caught my reflection in the mirror above the mantel. There I was, the same woman who'd once been told, "You don't belong here anymore." I smiled at that reflection, faint but sure, and whispered, "I do now." Then I turned off the lights, locked the front door, my door, and slipped the keys into my pocket. It felt like closing the last chapter of a long, brutal book. But it wasn't bitterness that filled me. It was strength. Strength born from knowing I hadn't just kept my home. I'd rebuilt myself inside it. As I walked to bed, the house creaked softly in the quiet, like it was breathing with me. I paused at the window one last time, looking out at the garden. The moonlight glowed on the roses, the ones I'd planted the week after winning the case. They'd survived storms, drought, and frost, just like me. I smiled. "If you were me," I said softly, imagining the camera light blinking on, "what would you have done?" Comment below.